Hello world, welcome back to Razor RC. Got a review video of the Tekno ET410 going on today. So here it is, all done with the build. Actually built it over the weekend. It took me about 8 hours. 6 hours on Saturday, basically putting together the whole rolling chassis, painting the body, and then 2 hours on Sunday, basically doing the electronics, trimming the body and wing, and then basically setting like caster, camber, all that good stuff, EPA, basically, so that would run properly. So yeah, here it is, Tekno ET410. I'll pop off the body. And so I did end up going with the green and purple colors. Actually turned out pretty cool. I like it. I never did this color combination before, but I like it. Anyway, so on my particular build, I'm running a new servo, an Expert SI4431 BLS, I guess brushless servo. Sanwa receiver, little RX 481. Hobby Wing V3.1 stock spec ESC, so this is a 100 amp ESC, and then I actually decided to go with the 6.5 turn motor from my SC 6.1 and moved it over to this truck. So had to grab a bunch of parts off of different vehicles, like I grabbed the aluminum servo horn off my EB410, receiver and ESC out of my TLR 22.4 2.0, and then the motor out of the SC 6.1. So it's just kind of the combination that seemed to work the best. And as usual, just like the EB410, the electronics are very cramped. But having some experience with that kit, at least I already kind of understood, the layout that I wanted to put in. My EB410 took me probably like half an hour, 45 minutes just to try to figure out how to wire it. And I just kind of modeled it the same way as my EB410. So I wanted to give you my comments, thoughts, and then maybe some of the things I didn't quite like about the build. But yeah, let's just get into it. So comments wise, the kit build was actually quite good. I do like the Tekno builds. The instruction manual is really good. So take a quick look at that. ET410. So the build pretty much is the same as the EB410. Pretty much no changes. I mean, they changed the shocks and the shock towers and stuff, but everything pretty much builds exactly the same as the EB410. So really nice, colorful instructions, very clear. Didn't really find any problems. A lot of text. Actually made me think, like, I wonder if they make a different version for different countries with different languages, because there's a lot of text, a lot of instructions, a lot of tips, build tips, etc. As opposed to something like a TLR manual where everything's just sort of diagrams. So the only thing I didn't really like about the instructions, or thought was a little bit of a flaw, is that when you build the actual shocks, they give you all the steps, kind of show you how to put it together, all that good stuff. But then they forget to tell you that there's an O-ring that actually goes into the cap before you put it on. So they tell you step K4, put on the cap. They actually do mention it in the shock filling instructions, so they actually show you that O-ring that needs to go in there. But when you're putting together shocks and just following it from the earlier instructions, you may wonder why you have an extra O-ring lying around. So that's the only thing I didn't quite like. As usual, they have a lot of nice setup information, instructions on how to kind of get use some of the adjustments and stuff. They're very nice, like parts drawings of all the different screws and washers and stuff, which are 1-to-1 scale. So it's nice to be able to refer to that as you're building the kit. And the other cool thing I liked about the way the parts went together is that they kind of package all the screws together. So you might have like something like a bag, A or whatever. But if it's got different size screws, like an 8mm button head and then a 10mm button head, they'll actually package the 8mm separately. So there are some parts where you might have two 8mm screws and then like 6 10mm screws, and they're packaged differently. So it makes it actually a little more easy to basically find the right screws and make sure you're not using the wrong screws in the wrong place. So anyways, that's pretty nice overall. I do like the manual. So the build was pretty good overall. As I mentioned, most of the parts are in bags. Actually, all the parts are in bags, so they go steps A through M or whatever it is. And then most of the parts, or probably about half the parts, are still on part trees. About half are pre-cut for you. That's better than the AE stuff, so I do like seeing pre-cut parts. some things I noticed differently from the EB410 was the diff housings, or I don't know what you call these, the diff cups on the EB were a little bit too fat, and so it was hard to get on the ring gears or the spur gears. So these are actually molded and manufactured a little bit better, so they did fit on nice and smooth, no issues there. There was a little bit of flashing on those diff cups that I trimmed off with a hobby knife. Not totally necessary, but just to make sure you have a nice, perfectly circular diff cup before you try to snap that on is kind of a good idea. So probably the only thing I really had to change or modify, you know, as the parts came out of the bags. High quality sway bars. These are pretty sweet little things. You know, they actually have steel ball studs. They actually have these nice molded links and stuff. You know, basically these I don't know what we call them, 4-hole attachments for the actual bar themselves. So the sway bars on this are really nice, high quality, really nice wheel nuts as well. So that is an upgrade from the EB410. So these are like their high-end aluminum serrated, basically machined wheel nuts, lock nuts. I guess, you know, they expect you to put a lot of power in these things, so you really want some nice lock nuts to make sure your wheels don't fall off and strip. Any other issues I had? Well, one mistake, it was really my own mistake, but inside basically one of these diffs, I had two of the shims stuck together, and I inserted it into the diff and then, you know, filled it all up, and then found I was missing one shim all the way at the end after everything was completely put together, and I'm like, oh crap, you know, where's that shim? So I basically had to drain the fluid, take everything apart. You know, it was really user error, but as you put these things together, make sure you have all the parts in the bag before you actually assemble the diffs especially. That might save you some time, save you some mess. Just a quick little tip. Another thing, the kingpins, probably maybe one of the trickiest parts to do, but the kingpins for these spindles, actually there's two of them, one on the bottom, one on the top, but you gotta, you know, definitely make sure these are threading in straight into the spindles, because basically the blocks and the spindles are at different angles. So as you're screwing these in, you know, sort of look at it from different angles, make sure that screw is actually going in straight. If it's off to the side, you'll notice it immediately. And the other thing I would do is probably just put in one with a couple of turns, and then start the other one and screw that one in, just so that you're making sure that this thing is, you know, perfectly lined up within the caster block, and you're not trying to mount it at some kind of weird angle. So anyways, just a quick tip on that. Bug flying around. Other things, these little bushings that go into the bell cranks, these little aluminum pieces, they are hex, I guess, bushings that go into the plastic bell cranks. These do need to be flush, so make sure you snap those all the way down. They should not stick up at all. Actually, just put them down on the table and press them down onto a flat surface to make sure they were all the way in. But I think some people had issues with these stripping it, you know, if they crank down the screw too tight on the other end. So it is nice that they try to make them as tight as possible. They actually say to put a little bit of glue on top. I didn't do that, but that is certainly an optional thing you can do. Other mistakes I personally made, and it's nothing really wrong with the build, but the diff fluids are 30, 30, 10, and it comes with a 30 and 10K bottle, obviously. I assumed it was 10, 30, 10, because usually the center disc is a little bit higher than the front and rear, and the front and rear are oftentimes quite close. For example, in the B64D, that's how they run. But yeah, read the manual. It does say 30K, 30K, 10K. I actually lowered that a little bit. I'm running about 25K in the front, just because 30 seemed a little bit high. Usually I run about 2-to-1 ratio between the front and the rear, so 20K is probably about right. 25K seems about right to me, so maybe something you want to consider if you're building this from scratch. And then really the last thing is that the rear wing actually has cutouts for where you're actually supposed to trim them. You got to go beyond that. So because the shock tire is a little wider, these shocks stick out a little bit more. You basically have to trim all the way up to the edge of the wing so that you got full clearance, basically as the arms move up and down and the shocks move up and down. So yeah, that was kind of my basic comments. Issues I had with the build, actually the 30K diff fluid bottle, I blew the tip off, so actually, maybe I was squeezing it too hard, that might have been my problem. But yeah, the diff bottle, the tip blew off, and so I basically had to kind of just dump it into this diff cup on the front and rear. That was one problem I had, couldn't really put it back together. probably was my fault, but just something I ran into. Another thing is the shock caps. So are these shock caps better than the EB410? If you've seen my EB410 review video, I did complain quite a bit about these shock caps. And as far as I can tell, they're pretty much the same. Now, I think I had a little bit less of a problem with these shock caps as opposed to my EB410. Maybe I'm just a little more sensitive or paying attention a little bit better, but yeah, they still can cross thread. You know, you still got to be super careful when you put in these bleed screws to not strip out the holes, because this plastic is quite soft. They didn't, you know, a couple of them seem maybe not perfectly round. So overall, you know, I don't think the shock caps are any better. I have actually ordered aluminum ones because, you know, I mean, I got these on and it's working, but just to save yourself some headaches, simplify your life, you know, it's battling shock caps and trying to thread them on and off like 3 or 4 times just to get one on is not something I really want to spend a lot of time doing. So I ordered the aluminum shock caps. If you did for your EB410, if you own, you know, you probably want to buy them again for this thing. So I wish they just added maybe $20 to the price of the kit. You know, the kit retails for $429. I think if they increased it to $449 or $450 and included aluminum shock caps, that'd be well worth it to me. I mean, anyways, enough about the shock caps. I don't really like them, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Other things I noticed is, and I'm a little curious, but I did notice that Tekno really doesn't make aluminum ball stud washers. So some of these spots, they crank on a ton of little ball stud washers. Like here, I think it's something like 6 washers. It's either 4 or 6. There's some other spot where you got to put on 6. I guess they're 1/2 mil washers, but I mean, why not have aluminum like 1mm washers? Why do we have to put on 6 of these? I mean, maybe it's a cost savings thing because stamping, these are probably just punched out steel pieces, and that's probably pretty cheap to do. But I mean, everyone else has aluminum ball stud washers, so I wish Tekno did that as well. And so the last thing I did was, the kit comes with right and left-handed hex screws for the shocks where they mount into the arms. I'm not using them. I actually ended up just grabbing both the right-handed hex screws and using them for the front, just so they don't really, you know, sometimes you just tend to get beat up or dirt filled or whatever. So using hex screws on the front, fine. I'm using all right-handed threaded screws, and then on the rear I'm just using like standard button head 18mm screws. So I did that with my EB410. I don't like those left-handed screws. I don't really like these hex head screws either, but at least on the front they make some sense. So I think Tekno went a little overkill with those. I've never really had screws unthread themselves from my shocks. So anyways, that's pretty much that. Yeah, so that's about it for the review. I actually did get a chance to drive this. Initial thoughts, I ran maybe 4 or 5 packs today at my local track. A bunch of other people actually wanted to drive the truck, so I let them. It was a very popular truck. But initial thoughts, it drives a little bit like the EB410. It doesn't seem quite as nose weight biased as the EB410, maybe because it's got the bigger body and, you know, fatter wheels all around. So I wouldn't be surprised if the weight distribution was not quite as upfront. So it drives a little more neutral. The kit setup I thought was really, really good. You know, it's probably 90% there, you know, as far as I can tell. I'm going to be making small changes here and there, but overall, kit setup was quite good. Pretty happy overall. It lands super plush. You know, the big fat tires actually with the big fat foams makes the truck land quite plush. So these shocks, you know, are obviously larger than the EB410. So it just jumps and lands quite plush. It does nosedive quite a bit, so probably work on adjusting that a little bit. But overall, yeah, the kit set quite good. Very, very fun truck to drive. You know, probably the most fun RC car I own right now. So if you're just looking for something to mess around with, have a lot of fun, it jumps and does crazy things in the air. It, you know, has tons of traction. It lands really well. You can throw in a lot of power. So very fun truck overall. Happy with it so far. Those are just my initial thoughts, and I will have a full review coming up, you know, probably in a few weeks or so. But yeah, anyways, that's it for my review. Please like, subscribe, share, hit the add notifications button, comment below, thumbs up, whatever. That all helps me out, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Look for more videos soon. Bye.